Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
The Saints now sit at 2-2, 4 games into the season, as another one fell through their fingertips Sunday in Atlanta. Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. For the second straight week, the Saints just couldn't finish, giving Atlanta a minute on the clock to get into field goal range and a chance at the win. It didn't matter that the defense didn't allow a touchdown all day, or that they held the Falcons to just over 300 yards and only 88 on the ground, or that the offense went 3 of 4 in the red zone and put up 24 points, because in the end, it just wasn't enough. Head coach Dennis Allen said that is definitely something they have addressed.
Don't feel a lot differently this afternoon than I did, yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening. Felt like there was a number of things that we did well, and yet, we've got to find a way to make the plays at the end of the game to give ourselves an opportunity to win. You can't spot your opponent 14 points in a tightly contested game and expect to win. So there's some things that we've got to clean up.
Offensive and defensive players echoed the sentiments. Here's guard Lucas Patrick and linebacker Pete Werner.
I think some people label it frustration. I'll label it battle-tested. I've been some other places where didn't have games go your way early in the season, but later in the season, you're more prepared for those moments, and you can rattle off enough wins and make your way to the dance, and who knows what happens once you're playing in January and February now. So, we need to learn to finish. We need to learn to close teams out, execute, not just on last drives, because you could say, the last 2 games we've driven the ball down and scored, but it's not that. I mean, it's coming out of the second half and scoring points, or it's being more sure in our protection to where maybe some reads are easier to see, or run games getting just that little, 1 or 2 inches play side, which doesn't seem like a lot, but, AK's a special guy. Jamal is such a physical runner that we can get them more one-on-one in the third level. Those are the plays that we look at. Like, everyone can say didn't finish or whatever, but it's like playing the totality of the game and handling what we can handle every play to really make it to where the finish is every play, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you just have to, moving forward, you got to, just keep increasing what you're doing well and eliminate the weaknesses. Obviously, we don't want to be in that point where we want to say, oh, I wish we had this game back. We're 2-2 sitting right now, but we got a long season, so we don't want to be making those comments at the end of the season. We're going to try and push for these wins, but it starts with executing in practice and getting a good game plan and going out and executing at the end of the day.
After watching film Monday morning with the team, no one feels better about the loss, but there are specific things that this team knows that they need to fix. Let's break down the 26-24 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. Joined by John DeShazier here on the New Orleans Saints podcast, talking after a disappointing loss, 26-24 in Atlanta Sunday. This is a rivalry matchup. The fans care about it a lot, and you were in it until the very end. But I think this game honestly got lost in the first quarter, the way the Saints gifted the Falcons 14 points.
Well, that could be, but that still was the chance to win at the end. All you have to do is you get a defensive stop and you win the game. So, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It could have been the early ones. Obviously, it doesn't help when you give up 2 non-offensive touchdowns, as the Saints did on a muff punt and a pick 6. So those things don't help. But there still was the chance at the end to take the ball away, to get a 4 and out rather, to get the ball back for the offense and to take the victory formation, and they didn't do it. And so that's what ticks you off for the second straight week. The defense was on the field, had a chance to finish it, and didn't finish it. So that's something that I understand. They only gave up 15 to Philly, and the defense only gave up 4 field goals to the Falcons, even though, the point total was 26, but defense only gave up 4 field goals. But the fact of the matter is, The offense gets paid to try to score touchdowns every drive, and the defense gets paid to pitch shutouts. Nobody's going to be perfect, obviously, but when you got to have it is when you got to have it. When the offense had to have a drive yesterday, the offense got a drive. It was a slow day, but the offense got a touchdown drive and the PAT to take the lead. And when the defense had to have it, they didn't have it at the end, and that's the thing that you remember the most.
There are so many moments in the last 5 minutes of play that we could dissect because the Saints got the ball back with 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They were trailing at that point. They needed a score, and they are unable to get one. They drive to the 5. They have multiple opportunities to score. They were first and goal.
First and goal at the 5, and I don't have a problem with that because you don't know if you're going to get back down there. So you got to go for it, even though they lose 2 yards and basically it ends up being fourth and goal from the 7. But I don't have a problem with that because you don't know at that juncture in the game if you're going to be able to get back down there. So do you kick a field goal and say, okay, we can kick another field goal and tie it, or do you kick a field goal and say, well, maybe we get a touchdown to win it or whatever? But I don't have a problem with going for it on fourth down, even though you're down there, and a field goal, in hindsight, obviously, would have won the game. But you're thinking, we got to get 7 here because we hadn't been down here much, if at all. So we got to get one. Well, actually, I take that back. The Saints scored 3 times in the red zone. All 3 touchdowns were red zone touchdowns. But at that juncture, you're thinking, maybe this isn't going so great. We got to get it while we're down here to take the lead and hopefully kind of, crush this little uprising. So I have no problem going for it in that situation. And even though they didn't get it, thank goodness, defense holds, offense goes back on the field, gets the touchdown, only leaves, I think, a minute left on the clock. And that's where your defense has got, the defense is the strength of this team. And it's got to get the stop. It's got to get off the field. It cannot, and even though it was a 58-yard career-long field goal from Younghoe Koo, you still got to keep that team out of field goal range. However that happens, you got to be able to do it if you're the Saints. And they couldn't get pressure on Kirk Cousins the entire game. They couldn't get off the field a few times. I mean, now overall, because the Falcons were only 4-13 on third down, but it feels like all 4 were like 3rd and 8. Times where they needed to get off the field and they couldn't get off the field. And some of those led to some of those field goals that end up being the difference in the game.
Yeah, so at that point when they were down there in the red zone, goal to go, they were down 20-17. The Saints were down 20-17. And then, 23-17.
Yeah, 23-17.
Because Koo had hit a field goal before that. So 23-17. So, yeah, you needed a score. I don't disagree with the call there because you give the Falcons horrible field position, and then you were able to stop them. Defensively, you force them to go 3 and out, and then you give yourselves another opportunity to score, which the Saints were able to do. That last minute, though, because you left a little bit too much time on the clock, and that touchdown drive, and you give them a minute to work with, that is where I think it just really stings.
Well, but if this defense is what it says it is, believes it is, this team believes it is, it's got to get off the field in that situation. And I know it's tough to say because the Falcons, after this touchback, they get the ball at 30. They really only need 35, maybe 40 yards to get in decent field goal position. And in fact, they only got 30 yards because they got to the 40 and had to kick it from there. But still, you've got to be able to figure out some way to get off the field. You got to get the ball back. That's what you get paid for. The offense gets paid to score touchdowns, to score, and the defense gets paid to get stops. And I know I'm nitpicking because and at the end of the day, people always say the end of the day, right? Nobody says at the beginning of the day. At the end of the day, they gave up 4 field goals, and that should be enough to win an NFL game. That should be enough. But on Sunday, it wasn't enough because of the other errors that they had to cover for. And it's one of those games where it's unfortunate, but it's the NFL and nobody gives a rat's behind about sympathy and those kinds of things. You got to win when you get the chance. And if you don't, this is one of those games where you look back and if you're 10-7 or if you're 9-8 or whatever the record is at the end of the year, you're looking at these last 2 games saying, if.
Right.
if the Saints would be 4-0 if they don't, lose
Literally
Dallas
just one
Goedert.
play here or there.
Yeah, a couple of plays, and but that's all it takes in the NFL. That's all it takes. And so Alvin Kamara was really succinct yesterday post game, because Alvin was like, "Look, that's why I wasn't celebrating over the first two games, the blowout games, because in the NFL." You got to win the tight ones. The good teams win the tight ones, and the Saints didn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is back-to-back weeks now where the Saints had an opportunity till the very end to win the game, and it was the defense that couldn't uphold, I guess, their end of the bargain, although they had done a phenomenal job 3 quarters prior.
Because I hate to.
And that's what's tough.
I hate to kick the defense around, because they played phenomenally
so good
against Philly except 2 plays. 65-yard touchdown run and a 61-yard catch and run that got Philly in position. And they played pretty phenomenally against Atlanta. But, phenomenally doesn't mean anything in the one-loss standings. The only thing in the one-loss standings is the win or the loss. And so that's the thing that's aggravating. And again, this defense says it wants to be on the field. It wants that responsibility. If you want that responsibility, that goes with wearing that crown. That goes with it.
Yeah, I mean, we can really zero in here on it was that defensive pass interference call on Paulson Adebo that gave them the Falcons 30 yards to really move into position for Koo to be able to make that kick. Paulson had a couple penalties like that throughout the game. He does come away with an interception early in the game, which obviously was great. It was good, that takes possession away from the Falcons. But some of the penalties in this game, even though you only have 6 total for 60 yards, they were crucial penalties at key moments, and you just can't lack execution. There's 2 on Taliesin Fuaga, and we've seen him play pretty clean so far this year. A couple just really tough moments.
Well, the DPIs hurt the most, obviously, because one of them happens on the game-winning drive, and it puts the Falcons in the field goal position ultimately. But that's the way the Saints play defense. That's the way their corners are going to play. They're going to play man-to-man. They're going to play bump and run. Mm-hmm. They're going to be handsy. They're going to be physical. And so sometimes those are going to go for you, and sometimes they're going to go against you. And unfortunately, several went against Adebo on Sunday. So those are things that will have to be cleaned up. And sometimes it just depends on the officiating crew that you get.
Yeah.
Because some are more apt to call pass interference than others. Mm-hmm. So now you got to, but you've got to be able to play cleaner. I mean, that's just the fact of it. If that's what they're calling, that's what they're calling. And that's the way the game's going to be. So you got to be mindful of how you're defending if you're out there playing bump and run. But that's the way the Saints are going to play. They're not going to, because think about it. Can you imagine what it would have been like today if the Saints sit back and play zone, play prevent, or not necessarily prevent, but if they play zone and give up a big chunk because you're playing soft, well, everybody would have been saying, well, why weren't they playing man to man? Mm-hmm. So now you're playing man to man. You pick up a DPI, and everybody's saying, well, why were they playing man to man? So it's just it's one of those things where you're not going to be right unless you win the game.
Of course.
So the only way you're going to be right is to win the game, and the only way to be right on Sunday was to not commit that defensive pass interference. Whether or not Adebo and the Saints believe it was a DPI or not doesn't matter. The officials did, and that turns out to be the difference in the game.
That play, I was looking at it, the line looked like they were a little out of whack. They were supposed to blitz, but I think there was some miscommunication there. It didn't look like they executed up front the way they were supposed to either. And
look, however it went, they just didn't get enough juice on Kirk Cousins the entire game.
Yeah.
I think they sacked him once. That was Peyton Turner who forced a fumble. Unfortunately, the Falcons recovered that fumble, but they didn't get Kirk Cousins off his spots enough. And look, Falcons only had 315 yards, so it's not like they did a horrible job, but Kirk Cousins is a stationary target for the most part. So you know where he's going to be. And they did a much better job against some mobile quarterbacks heading into this game. And the Falcons had a couple of injuries on the offensive line. So you figured, okay, maybe the Saints will be able to take advantage of this. And they weren't able to get Kirk Cousins. And that's the biggest thing that stuck out to me. Now, that last throw where he picks up the DPI, that was a quick one. So I don't know if they would have gotten there anyway. Right. Because that was basically one-on-one. I'm going to throw it out here and see if my guy can, catch a deep one, or if it falls incomplete, or if you pick up the DPI, one of the three. But, I mean, he just got rid of it pretty quick. But there just wasn't enough pressure on Kirk Cousins in that entire game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned just the one sack, but it did seem like he had a lot of time. And there was one play where he had all the time in the world. And I think DA took the entire line out and switched him.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those where you probably figure, okay, these guys must be gassed if they're not being able to get to the quarterback, because they effectively, obviously, gotten to the quarterback in the first 3 games.
Yeah.
They'd done it well. But for some reason, I don't know what, and the Falcons, it's not like they were in max protect, but they couldn't get to Kirk Cousins. For whatever reason, they just couldn't get to him. And if you can't affect the quarterback, I don't care who you're playing, at some point it's going to come back to bite you. It just will.
Okay, so Colin Saunders comes back in this game. He's been injured for the first 3 games of the season. Did he mess up the line, the sink that they've been in?
I don't think so. I mean, because Colin's not really much of a pass rusher anyway. I mean, I know the Saints signed him and said, okay, we can get some sacks, from that position out of him, but he's not really historically been that guy anyway. That's really Brian Brzee at defensive tackle if you're talking about guys who are going to get sacks. And if you slide Cam Jordan inside, you hope to get some pressure there. Or maybe you might even flip inside, from time to time, maybe Chase Young or maybe even Carl Granderson, get some pressure from those guys. But that's not really something Colin Saunders did. Now, the Saints did do a decent job against the run, and that's what Colin Saunders is pretty much around for, is to kind of be that plugger stopping the run. But I don't know. To me, it's just guys weren't winning one-on-ones. And you got, somebody's got a one-on-one, and whoever's got the one-on-one, even if it is Colin Saunders who hadn't played this season, if it's him, you got to win it. You got to win it because your teammates are relying on you to apply that pressure. And if you can't win it, now, I don't know if the Saints were necessarily hesitant to blitz with linebackers yesterday because you don't have DeMario Davis, who's your best pass rushing linebacker. And then Willie Gay Jr. gets hurt early. So that depletes the depth at linebacker completely, because now DeMarco Jackson is going to have to play alongside Pete Werner. And so maybe you don't blitz as much because maybe those two guys aren't as familiar with it. You don't necessarily want to blitz too much with your secondary. I know Alontae Taylor's got 3.5 sacks, but, do you want Alontae to be leaving, whether he's covering Drake London or Kyle Pitts or whoever it was he was on yesterday, do you want him to leave that responsibility to a linebacker while he blitzes? So it's one of those where you hope to be able to get the pressure you want from the front four. And again, I was just a little bit perplexed. Not perplexed. I thought the Saints would rush the passer better. I thought they would get there more.
Yeah, I mean, with the injuries on the offensive line, definitely you would think that the Saints D-line and how well they had been playing, they would have a lot of opportunity there to get after Kirk Cousins. But you mentioned the injuries. Very early in this game, Willie Gay Jr. goes out with a hand injury, and then DeMarco Jackson comes in, also his first action this season. So that does hurt you. They always say next man up, but it is, as you say, next man up for a reason. He's not the man. So there's going to be a change from what you have and your abilities with DeMario Davis in there, then when you put Willie in there. And I thought Willie played well to start. He was all over the place. And then DeMarco Jackson comes in. That takes place early in the game, and then you go a little bit further on and Tyrann Mathieu gets hurt, which affects things immensely in your secondary.
When you go from at linebacker, you go to the next man, which is Willie Gay, to the next man after that man. And so now that's going to hurt. That's obviously going to hurt. You can't be as exotic if you don't have DeMario Davis, and you can't be even less exotic if you don't have Willie Gay Jr. So that affects the linebackers. That affects your defense. And then if Tyrann Mathieu's not on the field, then that means JT Gray is going to have to play. And you lose. And look, all hats off to him. But if you don't have Tyrann Mathieu out there, Tyrann Mathieu is a future Hall of Famer. And to not have him on the field, you lose something there. Whether it's, and I understand Will Harris is there and Jordan Howden is there, but you got to have, you're going to have to play JT Gray also. And look, it affects you. It affects what you want to do defensively, because if you don't have that dude who can see things and diagnose quickly and make a play, you lose all of that when Tyrann Mathieu's not on the field. So your defense is affected. And again, the defense held up pretty well, 315 yards, 413 third downs. Kept the Falcons out of the red zone, didn't allow them to score an offensive touchdown. But unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but unfortunately, you needed more. And they just didn't have a little bit more to finish it out.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to say that because last week it was 15-12 as the final score. You give up only 15 points. This time it's 26-24. So you give up a good amount of points, but it's not because the defense gave it up.
Look, I saw, and I think it's correct, the Saints defensively have given up 4 touchdowns this season. 4 in 4 games.
And so what's the problem? Is it just execution on the offensive side?
Well, because this is an equal opportunity, complementary kind of deal. So, neither side has held up its end as well as it should have given the opportunities. The offense absolutely has to win the Philly game. You get 2 turnovers, you get, I think, 4 sacks, you get a block punt, and you get 12 points.
Yeah.
The offense has to hold up its end better. Now, having said that, 24 points would have been enough ordinarily if you don't hand away 14 points. Because the muff punt, I still am not exactly sure what Rashid Shaheed
was thinking,
what he saw, but it was one of those, you don't field a punt inside your own 10, much less your own 5. And I don't care how good you are, you just don't field it right there. And it just went completely haywire with him muffing that punt. And then Derek Carr's, pick 6, it goes in the books as a pick 6. It goes in the book as, a Derek Carr mistake. He's throwing a pass, and the guy it just hits the guy's hand. I don't even know if he's trying. I don't even know if he's trying to deflect it. He's just got his hand out there, and unfortunately, it hits his hand, goes right to the linebacker who's got a clear path.
Yeah.
So it was one of those weird things that just happened, but you got to be able to overcome it. So now, offensively, you score 24, but you know what? You needed 27. You needed 31. You needed more from the offense. And there was a good stretch of that game where the offense really got in the mud and didn't give you much of anything. And so now you got to look at that part. Again, complementary football. You had a special teams bust. You had a defensive bust. And you had some offensive busts. And you still lose 26-24. So it's a close game, but close don't mean nothing. Close means nothing. All close means is the Saints are 2-2 instead of 3-1 or instead of 4-0.
Yeah, close means you could have won and definitely had opportunities to do so. Offensively, things looked like they were moving very well until Taysom Hill gets hurt.
Yeah.
And you realize that I think in that moment I was like, man, everyone has been talking about Alvin Kamara, and Alvin Kamara needs to play. And he does. He is a huge part of this team. But Taysom Hill's effect on what they were able to do offensively, the pressure it took off of Kamara, the defense didn't know who to cover or what to cover.
Well, Taysom offers you that element of physicality that neither Alvin nor Jamal Williams nor anybody else on this team can give you when they line up at tailback.
And those short yardage plays.
He gives you a physicality where there are times Taysom runs the ball, and I know nobody will ever admit it, but it looks like defenders say, you know what, I really don't want to be bothered with trying to tackle this dude. There are times where when he gets into a scene, he can administer some punishment. Now, unfortunately, he gets hurt. And when he gets hurt, it affects the offense because, of course you build certain elements around him. You get in short yardage situations, and if Alvin Kamara is coming into the game with rib injuries or rib issues, then you say, and Taysom Hill runs for 2 touchdowns yesterday because they're getting short yardage. And ordinarily, I would think in this offense, we saw in game 1, they got down and they said, okay, we're going to give this ball to Alvin Kamara until he gets into the end zone. Where yesterday it was like, well, Alvin's getting a little banged up. We got something else for you. And they run Taysom Hill and he scores a couple of touchdowns. But you remove that element now. So now it's, you're getting 3rd and short, or what are you going to do? Falcons are going to load up, of course, and you can load up on Taysom. But Taysom might just run over somebody. I mean, there might not be a hole there. He might create the hole after he tramples somebody. It's one of those situations. So when you lose him, and you don't have him also for the passing game, and you don't have him on special teams because he's pretty critical on special teams too. Well, now all of a sudden you need 4 guys to fill his roles.
Yeah.
And you don't have him. You don't have that big thumper at tailback now. You got Alvin, you got Jamal Williams. And look, again, they're physical, but they're not as physical as Taysom Hill. They don't bring that element that Taysom. And when Taysom's on the field, the gravity says, defense, watch out for 7. He's probably going to get the ball, and he's going to hit you hard when he gets it. So now all of a sudden he becomes a great decoy also. And you lose that, and that affects the offense immensely. He is a huge part of what this team wants to do, and that's the unfortunate part of him getting injured. Now it's an abdominal injury. Before that it was chest, and it's probably related. But it's one of those things where he's probably going to have to sit until he gets all the way right, because he's not going to, he might be in this situation every game because Taysom Hill does not tiptoe. He doesn't run out of bounds. He's going to take a lot of contact, and he's going to administer a lot of contact, and he's going to get bruised and battered.
Yeah. I don't know how much protection you can wear around your chest that allows you to play in a football game, but especially the way he plays, it's going to be hard for him to now with 2 separate injuries. And I think DA said last night they're different sides.
Yeah. I mean, I have never been a professional athlete in my life. All I can do is talk as a 58-year-old layperson. But I've had cracked ribs, and that ish hurts. That hurts.
Okay, so Alvin Kamara played in a football game with reported
Let me tell you something.
broken
I
ribs,
know.
and he said no question about it ever. I was going to play.
Look, I'm telling you, if indeed there are fractured ribs, God bless him, because that stuff hurts. I mean, it hurts to roll over. I can't imagine playing a football game and having, I think Alvin had 26 touches or so yesterday. I can't imagine playing a football game. And I mean, now, granted, these are probably the toughest of the tough people who walk the earth. But still, that's something that is extremely painful. And anybody who's ever had broken ribs, fractured ribs, I'm sure can attest that thing hurts. That really hurts. So him playing was a testament to his toughness, and he produced. He produced.
Yeah.
But again, Taysom Hill gives you a different kind of production just because of the physicality. And I know it lifts an offense. Offensive linemen love to see that kind of physicality because offensive linemen always want to run block. That's what they want to do. They want to put your face in the dirt, and they want to, they want to maul you. And so when they see that kind of running behind them or in front of them, they're like, okay, this is the game we want to be in. And when you lose that, I'm not saying it takes away that mindset, but it does take away something because you have a guy who, again, will run over people as opposed to, the first guy getting him down. That first guy might get him down, but that first guy might be flat on his back when he gets him down.
After Hill went out of the game, it took a little while for the Saints to find their run game again. And there was a adjustment that Clint Kubiak made that I thought was really important to them getting back on track. And it was running Alvin on the opposite side. So they sent him, instead of usually going right side, he started going left. And that's when he found more room to run. What have you seen from the tackles here that kind of led to that decision?
I think we've seen one. I think we've seen the athleticism that they thought they were going to see out of this offensive line, and that's been able to create the creases for Alvin to get some runs. I think Trevor Penning has been a more, even though he's had success, I think, in the pass game too, in pass pro, but I think he's a better run blocker. But, you get into a situation where Talifuaga is the real deal. He's the real deal. And the more experienced side of your line on Sunday was the left side. It's Lucas Patrick at left guard. It's Talifuaga at left tackle. And those two guys have started every game now. Whereas on the right side, it's Landon Young at right guard and Trevor Penning at right tackle. So the left side's got a little bit more experience there. And it looks like Shane Lemieux really held up well at center. So you probably could get a little bit more traction going to the left because those guys have better chemistry, even though you had a week of practice. But those guys have had 4, 5, 6, 7, weeks of practice going back to training camp and preseason games, as opposed to Landon Young and Trevor Penning having a week and Shane Lemieux having a week with them. So it makes more sense to go left because those guys have a better chemistry over there. And then if you can get the perimeter blocks that you're looking for, that will open things up. Your receivers got to buy in. They got to be able to get some blocks, and your tight ends. But if you can get that, is going to be more successful on the left side, I think, than on the right side that only had that week of work.
A good in-game adjustment there. But the Falcons defense lined up with two safeties high. That's what they do. They have two of the best back there.
Yeah, they ain't going to give you anything deep.
They were not going to give Rashid Shaheed or Derek Carr a deep shot to anybody. But I think that Carr did a good job of working in the intermediary and the 7 to 12 yard range and getting a lot of stuff to Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed, but more of the kind of the shorter passes.
Yeah, the Falcons did what anybody who saw the Saints blitz Dallas and Carolina probably will do. You say, okay, you might score, but you're gonna have to take the long, hard road. So you're gonna start at your 25 or your 30. You're gonna have to make it, 8, 9, 10 plays. You're going to have to not make mistakes during those plays. And we will wager that either you'll make a mistake and turn it over, or you'll make mistakes that'll bog down the drive and you got to kick field goals. And that's a percentage play. And if you're the Saints, you got to be patient enough to be able to construct those drives. It might be 8 yards here. It might be 3 there. It might be 14 here. But you got to be able to construct those drives. But the odds are something's going to happen. Somebody's going to, false start. Somebody's going to commit a hold. Somebody's going to drop a pass, or maybe they'll be able to generate some pressure and get Carr to throw one away or something. You figure the cumulative effect over the course of an NFL game, it's hard to have 4 or 5 9-play touchdown drives. It just is. The odds are against it. So the Falcons say, okay, we're going to put 2 really, really good safeties back here. We're going to make you play underneath. And we're going to give up some stuff, but we figure we'll be able to stop you when the time comes, or you will stop yourself.
The long for the day for Carr was 25 to Rashid Shaheed, and then Chris Olave's long was 18, but they both averaged over 10 yards, 10.4, 10.9. So they were getting good yardage and working their way down the field.
And Alvin kind of couple. I mean, there's, not the tight ends have not been as involved or as productive in the past game in the first 4 that I think the Saints would like to see, or at least maybe just I would like to see.
It did seem like they were going to Juwan Johnson more in this game.
They tried a couple times and
targets to him, but
and unfortunately it just hadn't worked out the way we thought it would. Hopefully that's something that's on the come, because there's a pretty high usage of Alvin Kamara right now. And not to say that he won't hold up, but in the past it was 18 to 20, 22 touches for Alvin was a good number. Now he's in the 26, 27, 30 range, and it's like, okay, that accumulation kind of takes a toll. It takes a toll on anybody, which is why you have, Taysom Hill to kind of help out. But now if you don't have him, it's going to have to be Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams, I think, is probably better in pass block right now than Alvin is. So he's on the field in a lot of those situations when it's time, when you think you're going to have to pass and they're going to blitz. He's pretty good at blitz pickup. Not as accomplished a receiver as Alvin. But they're going to have to get that protection from somewhere. But I hope the tight ends can work in a little bit better. The receivers yesterday, when Carr had time, and which was pretty frequent, those guys were getting open and they were making catches. But you got to be able to not shoot yourself in the foot. You got to be able to not get yourself in those 3rd and longs and have to get 12 yards.
Where does Kendre Miller fit in? Because he's now available to come back. He's went on IR before the season started, has sat out his 4 games.
That's a really good question, because we know he's not going to be running back 1. That's Alvin. I don't think he's going to be 2. That's Jamal Williams. I don't think he's going to be, I say 1 and 2. Well, he's not going to be 1.5. That's Taysom. So where does he fit?
Yeah.
Where does he fit? I mean, I don't know how you fit him in. And then, it's a good problem to have if he's healthy, because we've seen a flash of what he can do. So it's a good problem to have if he's healthy, but he's got to prove that he can be productive in limited touches, because the touches will be limited. He will not be getting, 12 carries a game. He might be in for a little change of pace and maybe get 3 or something. And 3 might, that might be stretching it. He might get 2 or something. I mean, the touches won't be there because the guys who get the touches will be on the field. So that's going to be interesting to see how he's employed, how the Saints work him in.
I am curious to see him back on the field this week, just to see what he looks like. I mean, we've seen him standing around, but how he's moving, it's been tough for him because he's had a couple of injuries, and we haven't really gotten to see what he can possibly add to this offense. And now you kind of miss the first chunk of games, and you're not really a part of it.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee he's even going to be active for the game. I mean, he might just be a healthy scratch because he still needs to get in football shape. You know, whatever he's been doing conditioning-wise isn't the same as putting on the pads and going out there in a game. So he's going to have to get in football shape to be able to go out there and hopefully contribute. And while he does that, it might take another couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, by then, though, maybe Taysom Hill is back, if Taysom Hill misses any time at all, but maybe Taysom Hill is back. So, again, it's a good problem to have. But I just don't know where he fits in terms of being a running back for this team right now.
So this week is going to be a little bit different because the Kansas City game is on Monday. So you'll get a kind of bonus day. Looks like the Saints are going to take it as a rest day.
Yeah. From what I understand, there might not be an availability with the team until Thursday. Mm-hmm. So that'll be 2 days that you can kind of, you know, heal up some. And look, this team has played back-to-back really physical games. So there's some bumps and bruises that need to heal. Maybe Demario Davis is back for Monday night. Willie Gay, with it being a hand, I don't know if he'll be able to navigate around that. But Tyrann Mathieu is now a groin. It was his heel. It was his hamstring. He could use a little time off to kind of get himself back together. Taysom, you know, an extra day or two certainly would not hurt his healing process. So they've got some guys who can get, you know, maybe, you know, Cesar Ruiz, I'm forgetting about him at right guard. Maybe an extra couple of days or maybe this week off will help him get back on the field. So they got some guys who can benefit from playing on a Monday night because it gives you just that extra day of healing.
Definitely some things that need to get cleaned up execution-wise, both sides of the field. Well, maybe all three phases, really. And then the extra day of rest can help. And then it's going to be a tough one on Monday in Kansas City. But we'll get to that later in the week. JD, thanks for breaking this game against the Falcons down. Yeah,
it would have been nice to be breaking down a win. Thought it was going to be the case. But you know, a minute's a long time. And when they only need 30 yards or so. Didn't work out. Didn't work out.
Just definitely got to get him here. As JD and I alluded to, first availability of the week will be Thursday. And while DA acknowledged that the Saints are dealing with injuries to several players, they are still evaluating those injuries, and the first update will be with that injury report after practice on Thursday. It means our next podcast will be Thursday this week instead of Wednesday, and then we'll be back with you on Friday as we gear up for Kansas City Monday Night Football for Week 5.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.